At 4:47 a.m. on November 2, 1944, Private First Class Daniel Kovacs pressed himself into the mud beneath a fallen mahogany tree on Leyte Island, Philippines, and watched through his rifle scope as 73 Japanese soldiers moved through the jungle 340 yards downslope. The 22-year-old farm kid from Nebraska had been in position for 11 hours. His Springfield M1903A4 sniper rifle, serial number 3585624, was aimed at a trail junction the Japanese had been using for 3 consecutive nights to move supplies forward to their defensive positions. Kovacs had a problem. His rifle, equipped with a Weaver 330C telescopic sight, was accurate to 800 yards in the hands of a trained marksman. He was a trained marksman. He'd qualified expert at Camp Perry, scored 198 out of 200 possible points. But every time he fired, the muzzle blast gave away his position. The Springfield's .30-06 cartridge produced a report audible for over a mile in jungle conditions. After his first shot, every Japanese soldier within earshot would know exactly where he was. Standard sniper doctrine said take 1 shot, maybe 2 if the targets were confused, then relocate immediately. Never fire more than 3 rounds from the same position. The doctrine existed because snipers who stayed in position after firing got killed. Artillery, mortars, machine gun fire, all converging on the sound of that rifle shot. But Kovacs had done something that violated every regulation in the sniper manual. He'd taken 3 empty Ration cans, a handful of steel wool from the motor pool, and fashioned a crude suppressor for his rifle. The device shouldn't work. Suppressors required precision machining, baffles, careful alignment. A homemade contraption made from tin cans and steel wool should either blow apart on the first shot or do nothing at all. Kovacs had test-fired it once 2 days earlier, deep in the jungle away from friendly lines. The device had reduced the rifle's report from a sharp crack to a heavy thump, still audible but unrecognizable as a rifle shot. More importantly, it eliminated the muzzle flash completely and made it nearly impossible to determine the direction of fire. Before we continue with this extraordinary story of improvisation and precision, if you're finding value in these untold chapters of military ingenuity, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, whether it's Montana, Manila, or anywhere between. Your support keeps these forgotten stories of American resourcefulness alive. The Japanese column was moving through the junction now. Officers in front, supply bearers in the middle, guards at the rear. Standard formation. Kovacs had watched them use this trail for 3 nights. They moved supplies forward under darkness, thinking the jungle and the night protected them. He settled the crosshairs on the lead officer, a captain judging by the sword he carried. Range 340 yards. Wind negligible. Temperature 78 degrees. Humidity near saturation. He exhaled slowly and pressed the trigger. The Springfield fired. The makeshift suppressor absorbed most of the blast. The sound that emerged was a muffled thump, like someone dropping a heavy sack. The captain collapsed. The soldiers behind him stopped, confused. They looked at their fallen officer, looked around, didn't understand what had happened. No crack of a rifle. No muzzle flash. Just their captain suddenly on the ground. Kovacs worked the bolt. The action was smooth, well maintained. He chambered another round, acquired the next target, fired. Another officer went down. The column broke. Men scattered left and right off the trail, seeking cover, but they were scattering randomly because they didn't know where the threat was coming from. Kovacs fired again. Again. Each shot a careful aim, each bullet finding its target. The suppressor changed everything. He wasn't fighting doctrine anymore. He could stay in position. He could work. What happened in the next 5 days would demonstrate what one determined soldier with an improvised tool could accomplish when innovation met opportunity. To understand how Daniel Kovacs came to be lying in Philippine mud with a rifle modified in ways that could get him court-martialed, we need to step back 3 months. August 1944. Camp Stoneman, California. Kovacs was finishing sniper training with the 96th Infantry Division. The 96th, known as the Deadlier, was preparing for deployment to the Pacific. Their mission was to land on Leyte Island as part of MacArthur's return to the Philippines. Kovacs had grown up hunting on his family's farm outside North Platte. White-tailed deer, coyotes, prairie dogs at 300 yards. He knew rifles the way some men knew engines. When the Army tested him with the Springfield at basic training, he outshot the range instructor. The Army sent him to sniper school at Fort Benning. 8 weeks of training. Camouflage, fieldcraft, range estimation, ballistics, wind reading. He excelled at everything except one thing: target opportunity duration. Sniper instructors emphasized speed of relocation. Fire once, move. Fire twice, move faster. Never give the enemy time to fix your position. The doctrine made sense against an enemy with radios, artillery, and air support. But Kovacs kept thinking about something his grandfather had told him about hunting coyotes. His grandfather had been a predator control hunter in the 1920s, paid by ranchers to eliminate coyotes killing livestock. The old man had a saying, 1 shot scares them. 2 shots confuses them. 3 shots and they don't know where you are, they just know they need to leave. The principle was psychological. A single rifle shot from an unknown direction created fear but also determination to find and eliminate the threat. Multiple shots from an unseen position created panic, made enemies focus on escape rather than counterattack. But that principle only worked if the shooter could remain undetected while firing multiple times. And that required reducing the signature of the rifle. Kovacs started researching suppressors. He knew the military had experimented with them. The OSS used suppressed weapons for covert operations. But standard infantry snipers didn't have access to that equipment. Too expensive, too specialized, too likely to be stolen or lost. What if someone could make a suppressor from materials available in any army supply dump? On September 12, 1944, Kovacs was aboard the USS Goodhue, a transport ship carrying the 96th Infantry Division toward Leyte. The ship was crowded, hot, smelled of diesel fuel and unwashed bodies. Men played cards, wrote letters, slept in shifts. Kovacs spent his time in the mess deck, sketching designs in a notebook. He'd been thinking about the physics of sound suppression. A gunshot was simply burning powder creating expanding gas that propelled a bullet. The gas exited the barrel at supersonic speed, creating a pressure wave, a sonic boom on a small scale. That pressure wave was the muzzle blast, the sound that gave away a sniper's position. Suppressors worked by capturing that expanding gas and releasing it gradually through baffles, reducing the pressure wave. Professional suppressors used precision machine chambers, carefully aligned to ensure the bullet passed through without touching the walls. But Kovacs didn't need a perfect suppressor. He needed something that reduced the signature enough to make direction finding difficult. Something that could be made from scrap materials. Ration cans were everywhere in the army. Cylindrical tin containers, roughly 3 inches in diameter, 5 inches long. Sturdy enough to withstand shipping and handling. And they were disposable. Nobody would miss a few empty cans. Steel wool was standard issue in motor pools for cleaning engine parts. Fine metal fibers, excellent for absorbing and dispersing gases. Kovacs's design was simple. Take 3 Ration cans. Remove both ends from the first 2 cans creating tubes. Leave the bottom on the 3rd can. Drill a hole in that bottom, size it for a bullet to pass through, roughly 0.32 inches to allow clearance for the .30 caliber round. Stack the cans end to end. Fill them loosely with steel wool, leaving a clear channel down the center for the bullet's path. Secure the assembly to the rifle's muzzle with wire. When the rifle fired, the expanding gas would enter the first can, spread through the steel wool, gradually released through the gaps between the fibers. The steel wool would also absorb heat, reducing the temperature of the exhaust gas, eliminating muzzle flash. At least that was the theory. The problem was testing it. Firing a rifle aboard a troop transport was impossible. He'd have to wait until they reached Leyte. The 96th Infantry Division landed on Leyte on October 20, 1944. The landing was opposed but not heavily. Japanese forces had withdrawn inland, planning to defend from prepared positions in the mountains. American forces pushed forward rapidly, securing the beachhead, expanding the perimeter. Kovacs's platoon moved into the jungle on October 23. They encountered light resistance, scattered Japanese patrols, small firefights. The real Japanese defenses were ahead, dug into the ridgelines overlooking the Leyte Valley. On October 27, Kovacs's battalion established a forward position 3 miles from the main Japanese line. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hayes, called for volunteer snipers to conduct reconnaissance and harassment operations against Japanese supply routes. Kovacs volunteered. So did 3 other trained snipers from the battalion. They were formed into a 4-man team under Sergeant Thomas Mitchell, an experienced NCO who'd fought on Guadalcanal. Mitchell's orders were simple: locate Japanese supply routes, observe their patterns, disrupt their operations, gather intelligence. The team moved out on October 28, carrying 5 days of rations, minimal equipment, radios with limited range. They penetrated 2 miles into Japanese-held territory, set up observation posts overlooking known trails. For 3 days they watched. Japanese patrols moved along the trails every night, supply bearers carrying ammunition, food, water forward to the defensive positions. The movements were predictable, same routes, similar times. On October 31st, Sergeant Mitchell gathered the team and outlined a harassment plan. They would set up ambush positions along the trails, take single shots at Japanese personnel, then relocate before counterattack forces arrived. Standard doctrine. Safe, effective, limited risk. That evening, Kovacs approached Mitchell privately. He showed the sergeant his sea ration can design, explained the theory, asked permission to test it. Mitchell looked at the crude assembly of tin cans and wire. He asked if Kovacs was insane. Homemade modifications to weapons were strictly forbidden. If the device malfunctioned and injured Kovacs, Mitchell would face disciplinary action. If it worked but was discovered, both of them could face charges for unauthorized modification of military equipment. Kovacs said he understood the risks. But if the device worked, they could accomplish more in 5 days than most sniper teams accomplished in a month. Mitchell thought about the friends he'd lost on Guadalcanal. Thought about the Japanese soldiers moving supplies forward every night, supplies that would be used to kill American infantry in the coming offensive. Thought about doctrine versus results. He told Kovacs to test it once, deep in the jungle, away from both friendly and enemy positions. If it worked without blowing up, Kovacs could use it. If it failed, they'd forget the conversation ever happened. On November 1st at 1,300 hours, Kovacs moved half a mile from the team's position into dense jungle. He'd fashioned the suppressor the night before, working by moonlight, using a P38 can opener to remove the can ends, a bayonet tip to punch the bullet hole, wire from communication cable to secure the assembly. The 3 cans were stacked and wired to his Springfield's barrel. The steel wool was packed loosely inside, creating a mass of fine metal fibers surrounding the bullet's path. He aimed at a fallen log 50 yards away. Thick hardwood, good backstop. He settled into position, controlled his breathing, pressed the trigger. The rifle fired. The suppressor held together. The bullet struck the log dead center. But the sound was wrong. Instead of the sharp crack of an unsuppressed .30-06, the rifle produced a heavy thump, a sound like someone striking a barrel with a mallet. The muzzle flash was completely eliminated. No orange blossom of burning powder, no visible signature. Kovacs worked the bolt, chambered another round, fired again. Same result. The suppressor was functioning. He examined the device. The steel wool nearest the muzzle was singed but not burned through. The cans showed slight bulging from internal pressure but hadn't ruptured. The wire holding the assembly had tightened from heat expansion but hadn't failed. The suppressor worked. It was crude, probably good for 50 rounds before the steel wool degraded completely, but it worked. Kovacs returned to the team position. Showed Mitchell the device, still intact, still functional. Mitchell listened to Kovacs describe the sound, the lack of flash, the difficulty of determining direction. Mitchell made a decision. Kovacs would take the primary ambush position. The other 3 snipers would set up in secondary positions as backup. If Kovacs' suppressor allowed him to take multiple shots without being located, they'd let him work. If Japanese forces fixed his position, the other snipers would provide covering fire while Kovacs withdrew. That night, November 1st at 2,100 hours, Kovacs moved into position overlooking the trail junction he'd been observing for 3 days. He was alone. The nearest friendly soldier was Sergeant Mitchell, 200 yards upslope. The position was good. A fallen mahogany tree provided cover and concealment. The tree had fallen recently, still had leaves, created a natural blind. Kovacs settled in behind it, cleared lanes of fire, arranged his equipment for quick access. His Springfield was loaded with 5 rounds in the internal magazine. He had 60 additional rounds in stripper clips, arranged in pouches on his belt. The suppressor was secure on the muzzle. His rifle scope was zeroed for 300 yards. At 2,237 hours, he heard movement on the trail below. Japanese voices, low conversation, the sound of equipment. He looked through his scope, saw the column approaching. Estimated 70 to 75 soldiers, moving in formation. He waited until they entered the kill zone, that stretch of trail where his field of fire was unobstructed. The lead officer stepped into his crosshairs. Range 340 yards, quartering angle, target moving slowly. Kovacs fired. The first night, November 2, 1944, Kovacs fired 23 rounds from the same position over a period of 47 minutes. After the first shot dropped the captain, the Japanese column scattered. But they scattered without direction. They took cover on both sides of the trail, behind trees, in depressions, wherever they could find protection. But they were protecting themselves from a threat they couldn't identify. Kovacs waited 90 seconds. Let them settle into their hasty positions. Then he fired again. A soldier 20 yards from the dead captain collapsed. The other Japanese soldiers began firing, but they were shooting randomly into the jungle, spraying bullets in all directions. None of the bullets came near Kovacs's position. They didn't know where he was. He fired a third shot. Another soldier down. The Japanese firing intensified, but it was still undirected. Panic fire, desperation fire. Kovacs fired again. Again. Each shot carefully aimed, each bullet striking a target. He was shooting from 340 yards, but the Japanese were acting like the threat was 50 yards away in multiple directions. After his ninth shot, he heard a Japanese officer shouting orders. The remaining soldiers began withdrawing, dragging wounded comrades, leaving dead where they fell. They retreated back down the trail toward their lines. Kovacs let them go. He'd fired 9 rounds, achieved 9 hits. The suppressor was functioning perfectly. The steel wool was hot, singed but intact. The cans showed no signs of failure. He waited 2 hours. At 0047 hours, another Japanese patrol appeared on the trail. Smaller group, maybe 20 soldiers, moving cautiously. They found the bodies from the first engagement, stopped, spread out, searched for the ambush position. Kovacs shot the lead soldier. The group dove for cover, began firing into the jungle. Again, none of their fire came near his position. They were shooting at shadows, guessing, hoping. He fired 14 more rounds that night before the trail went quiet. Total count: 23 rounds fired, 21 confirmed hits, 2 probable hits on targets that fell in positions he couldn't observe clearly. The Japanese abandoned the trail. No more movement for the rest of the night. At 0430 hours before dawn, Kovacs withdrew from the position. He moved slowly, carefully, erasing signs of his presence. He rejoined Sergeant Mitchell at the rally point. Mitchell asked for the count. Kovacs said 21 confirmed. Mitchell was silent for a long moment. Then he asked if Kovacs could do it again. Kovacs said yes, but he'd need to repack the suppressor. The steel wool was degrading. They moved to a new observation position. Kovacs disassembled the suppressor, replaced the steel wool with fresh material from the team's cleaning supplies. The cans were still functional, slightly discolored from heat but structurally sound. November 2nd, daytime. The team observed Japanese activity. The trails were quiet. No movement. But smoke rose from positions 2 miles east, cooking fires, camps. The Japanese were still there, still moving supplies, but they'd shifted to different routes. Mitchell sent the other 2 snipers to scout alternate trails. They returned at 1,600 hours with reports of Japanese movement on a trail 3 miles north. The team moved. They reached the new position by 2,000 hours. Kovacs set up on a ridgeline overlooking a stream crossing, a natural choke point where the trail narrowed to cross a shallow creek. At 2,115 hours, a Japanese supply column appeared. Larger than the previous night, maybe 90 soldiers carrying crates, ammunition boxes, medical supplies. Kovacs began firing at 2,127 hours. The suppressor performed as before. Muffled reports, no flash, no directional indicator. He fired 31 rounds over 52 minutes. The Japanese column broke apart, scattered, attempted to return fire but couldn't locate him. By 0220 hours on November 3rd, the trail was abandoned. Bodies lay scattered near the stream crossing. Wounded soldiers had been dragged away but the dead remained. Kovacs's confirmed count for the second night, 28. Total running count, 49 confirmed kills in 2 nights. Sergeant Mitchell radioed battalion headquarters on November 3rd, reported the results, requested permission to continue operations. The radio operator asked Mitchell to confirm the numbers. Mitchell confirmed. The operator said he'd passed the message up the chain. 1 hour later, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes himself came on the radio. He asked Mitchell if this was accurate intelligence or speculation. Mitchell said it was accurate, observed through rifle scopes, confirmed by multiple team members. Hayes asked how one sniper was achieving these numbers without being overrun by Japanese forces. Mitchell explained about the suppressor. There was a long silence on the radio. Then Hayes said to continue operations but send detailed reports daily. November 3rd, daytime. The team repositioned again. Japanese patrols were actively searching for them now. 3 times during the day, Japanese soldiers passed within 100 yards of the team's concealed position. The team remained hidden, motionless, silent. At 1,630 hours, Kovacs repacked the suppressor with fresh steel wool. The cans were showing where now. The bottoms were bulging slightly from repeated pressure. The wire holding them had stretched. He rewrapped the assembly with fresh communication wire, doubled the strands. That night, November 3rd, Kovacs set up overlooking a trail junction 4 miles from their starting position. This trail was a main supply route, heavily used, well-worn. The Japanese came in larger numbers. 2 separate columns, one at 20:45 hours carrying ammunition, another at 2,310 hours carrying medical supplies and food. Kovacs fired 37 rounds that night. The suppressor began failing on the 34th shot, a slight crack appearing in the second can. He fired 3 more rounds before the crack widened. On the 37th shot, the second can ruptured. The sound was still suppressed compared to an unsuppressed rifle, but it was louder than before. Japanese soldiers immediately began firing in his direction. Kovacs withdrew from the position as bullets cut through the foliage above him. He moved 400 yards upslope, rejoined the team. His count for the third night, 35 confirmed kills. Total running count, 84. November 4th, daytime. Kovacs rebuilt the suppressor completely. He salvaged the first and third cans from the failed assembly, found 2 new cans in the team's rations, constructed a fresh suppressor. This time he used 4 cans instead of 3, thinking the extra length would provide more gas expansion volume, more steel wool for heat absorption. The 4-can suppressor was longer, heavier, changed the rifle's balance slightly. But it should last longer. Mitchell received new orders from battalion. Continue harassment operations but begin moving back toward friendly lines. The battalion was preparing for a major offensive on November 7th. The sniper team needed to be back in friendly territory by November 6th. That gave them 2 more nights. November 4th, 2000 hours. The team moved into position overlooking a trail complex where 3 paths converged. Intelligence reports indicated this was a major staging area for Japanese forces. Large numbers of troops moving through at night. Kovacs set up on a hillside 420 yards from the trail junction. Longer range than previous positions but better concealment, better escape routes. At 2130 hours, a Japanese battalion began moving through the junction. Companies of troops, not supply bearers. Combat soldiers, moving forward to reinforce defensive positions. Kovacs began engaging targets at 2147 hours. He focused on officers and NCOs, identifiable by their position in formation, their equipment. Leaders. Remove the leaders and the units lose coordination. He fired 28 rounds before the Japanese forces withdrew from the area. The 4-can suppressor performed better than the 3-can version. The sound signature remained consistent through all 28 shots. Confirmed kills, 26. Total running count, 110. November 5th, the final night. The team was scheduled to begin moving back to friendly lines at 0600 hours on November 6th. This was their last opportunity for operations. Mitchell asked Kovacs if he wanted to rest. They'd been in Japanese territory for 8 days, living on minimal rations, minimal sleep, constant tension. Kovacs said there was one more position he wanted to hit. A trail junction 5 miles deep into Japanese territory, a location they'd observed on the first day but hadn't approached because it was too far from friendly lines. Mitchell said it was too risky. They'd have to move through Japanese-held territory both directions, establish a position, conduct the ambush, then withdraw, all before dawn. Kovacs said he understood. But intelligence indicated that Trail Junction was the primary route for Japanese ammunition resupply. If they could disrupt it, they'd degrade Japanese defensive fire for the upcoming offensive. Mitchell thought about it. Looked at the other 2 snipers, both exhausted, both willing to follow orders. Looked at Kovacs, still alert, still determined. He approved the operation. The team moved out at 1800 hours November 5th. They moved slowly, silently, avoiding Japanese patrols. Twice they had to hide while Japanese soldiers passed within feet of their position. The tension was constant, suffocating. They reached the target trail junction at 2030 hours. Kovacs established his position on a ridge 380 yards from the trail. The other snipers set up in overwatch positions, ready to provide covering fire if needed. At 2145 hours, a large Japanese supply column appeared. 70 soldiers, maybe more, carrying wooden crates marked with Japanese characters. Ammunition boxes. Artillery shells. Mortar rounds. Kovacs began firing at 2203 hours. His first target was a soldier carrying what appeared to be a radio. Communications. Cut communications and the unit can't call for help. The soldier dropped. The column stopped. Kovacs fired again, hitting an officer near the front. The formation broke apart. He fired steadily, methodically. The four-can suppressor was performing perfectly. No muzzle flash. Minimal sound signature. The Japanese soldiers were firing into the jungle, but their shots were scattered across 180 degrees of arcade. They had no idea where he was. By 22:47 hours, Kovacs had fired 19 rounds. 18 confirmed hits. One miss, the only miss of the entire 5-day operation. His ammunition was down to 5 rounds remaining in pouches. The suppressor was degrading, the steel wool nearly consumed, but it was still functional. He fired his final 3 shots at targets of opportunity. 3 more soldiers down. Total count for the night, 21 confirmed kills. Total count for the 5-day operation, 131 confirmed kills. But 2 of those were later reclassified as probable because observers couldn't confirm the targets were dead versus wounded and evacuated. Final confirmed count, 112 kills in 5 days. Kovacs and the team withdrew from the position at 2,315 hours. They moved through the night, reached friendly lines at 0547 hours on November 6, 7 minutes before their scheduled return. On November 7, 1944, the 96th Infantry Division launched their offensive against Japanese positions in the Leyte Valley. The offensive met lighter resistance than expected. Japanese defensive fire was sporadic, disorganized. Ammunition expenditure appeared to be rationed. Intelligence officers later attributed part of this degraded defensive capability to disruption of Japanese supply lines in the days preceding the offensive. On November 10, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes summoned Private First Class Kovacs to battalion headquarters. Hayes asked to see the suppressor. Kovacs showed him the device, explained its construction, demonstrated the assembly process. Hayes asked if Kovacs understood he'd violated regulations by modifying his weapon. Kovacs said yes, sir. Hayes asked if Kovacs would do it again. Kovacs said yes, sir, if it saved American lives. Hayes was silent for a moment. Then he told Kovacs the Army was recommending him for the Silver Star. The citation would mention his effectiveness as a sniper but wouldn't mention the suppressor. The device was too irregular, too improvised, too difficult to explain to higher command. Kovacs asked what would happen to the suppressor. Hayes said it would be destroyed. No record of its existence would be kept. The Army couldn't afford to have enlisted men modifying weapons, even if the modifications worked. But Hayes also said something else. He said that sometimes the best solutions come from soldiers who see problems that officers don't. He said that innovation often happens at the edge of regulations, in the gap between doctrine and reality. He told Kovacs to keep thinking, keep observing, keep finding solutions. Just be careful about which regulations he chose to break. Daniel Kovacs continued serving with the 96th Infantry Division through the remainder of the Leyte campaign. He participated in the invasion of Okinawa in April 1945, served as a sniper through the brutal 3-month battle. His official kill count reached 187 confirmed by the end of the war. He never used a suppressor again. After the November operation, Battalion Command assigned a second observer to all sniper operations, standard doctrine for accountability and confirmation. The presence of an observer made it impossible to use unauthorized equipment without detection. But the innovation didn't die with that one operation. Kovacs had shown what was possible. Word spread through sniper communities in the Pacific Theater. Other snipers began experimenting with improvised sound suppression, using materials at hand, testing theories in the field. Most attempts failed. Some catastrophically, with suppressors exploding or bullets striking baffles and tumbling. But a few worked. A Marine sniper on Iwo Jima fashioned a suppressor from a mortar tube and copper mesh. An Army sniper on Luzon used sections of bamboo and kapok fibers. None achieved the effectiveness of Kovacs's design. His combination of Ration cans and steel wool, his understanding of gas expansion and heat absorption, his willingness to test and iterate, created something unique. After the war, Kovacs returned to Nebraska. He took over his family's farm, raised wheat and cattle, lived a quiet life. He married his high school sweetheart in 1946, had 5 children, 14 grandchildren. He rarely talked about the war. When asked, he'd say he did his duty like everyone else. The suppressor was never mentioned. It had been destroyed in 1944, no photographs existed, no official documentation. In 1982, a military historian researching sniper tactics in the Pacific Theater found a reference to Kovacs's 112 confirmed kills in 5 days in a battalion after-action report. The historian contacted Kovacs, asked how he'd achieved those numbers. Kovacs was silent for a long moment. Then he told the story. The Ration cans, the steel wool, the physics of sound suppression, the 5 nights in Japanese territory. The historian asked why this innovation wasn't preserved, wasn't documented, wasn't adopted as standard practice. Kovacs said because it was too simple. The army wanted sophisticated solutions, engineered systems, tested equipment. They didn't want to admit that a farm kid from Nebraska with some tin cans and steel wool had solved a problem their engineers couldn't. The historian asked if Kovacs had any regrets. Kovacs said no. He'd done what needed doing. Saved American lives by disrupting Japanese supply lines. That was enough. Daniel Kovacs died in 2003 at age 81. He was buried in North Platte City Cemetery. His obituary mentioned his military service, his Silver Star, his work as a farmer. It did not mention the Ration can suppressor. Did not mention the 112 confirmed kills in 5 days. Did not mention that he'd changed how one aspect of war could be fought, if only someone was willing to break the rules. His Springfield M1903A4, serial number 3585624, was donated to the Nebraska Veterans Museum in Lincoln. It hangs on a wall alongside other rifles carried by Nebraska soldiers in World War II. The rifle is unmodified, standard configuration. The suppressor is gone, destroyed 79 years ago on orders from a lieutenant colonel who understood that some innovations work better when they remain unofficial. But in the museum's archive there's a file folder. Inside is a photocopy of a battalion after-action report from November 1944. The report mentions a sniper team that disrupted Japanese supply lines, achieved extraordinary results, demonstrated exceptional tactical innovation. At the bottom of the report, someone has written in pencil, "Ration cans and steel wool. Sometimes the best weapons are the ones we improvise." That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through official channels or engineering committees. Through farm kids and mechanics who see problems, find solutions, and don't wait for permission to save lives. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Nebraska to New Guinea, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You're part of something special here. Thank you for watching and thank you for keeping these stories alive.